Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Talk with TQ and the Energy Stoners Cafe. Today, I have a really great guest, and I love guests like this because they're just so helpful in so many ways. His name is Dr. Cedrick, and he's written a book called The 7 Steps to Prevent Chronic Disease. It's about self-care advocacy, and it's an interesting book because there's a lot of stuff in here that you kind of know, but you might not follow. And he gives you 7 steps. It's very concise and very precise, but at the same time, I felt there's a little wiggle room in here. So you should read it. It's a good read, and it's a fast read and thorough. Should be in everybody's medicine cabinet. This is one of those books you should put in the medicine cabinet. So welcome, Dr. Cedrick. You're here again talking to me, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Toni. Thank you. The pleasure's all mine.
So tell me what prompted you to write this book and to make it so, I'll say, concise.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So it really starts with what inspired me to get into healthcare altogether. I grew up in Rochester, New York, upstate New York, as some would call it. And I worshiped with a predominantly African-American congregation of the Churches of Christ, North Greece Road Church of Christ. We had several hundred members. And one of the things that always stood out to me was on Sundays when we would come together for worship, we would have prayer requests. And what was noticeable about that was more than half, I'd say perhaps the majority of prayer requests were about health. So that's one of the things that inspired me to even pursue healthcare to begin with. Upon my graduation in 2013, one of the things that I did was I began to take some of the things that I had learned and teach people, notably the congregation. So I remember creating a seminar, a presentation on diabetes and how to prevent diabetes. And another congregation, the Lawson Road Church of Christ, called me and they wanted me to come, and then another congregation, and then another congregation. So over the years, from 2014 onward, I have really been speaking wherever I could and sharing the message of chronic disease prevention. And so by 2022, I actually realized that I should really put some of these things down. I had been speaking for several years now, and I had learned a lot because every time I would plan a lesson, I would have to do research and learn things that even I didn't know. But by putting my knowledge, a lot of the things that I had acquired down in the form of a book, I could distribute this information a lot more efficiently, right, without always having to be there. So that's one of the main things that inspired me. Now, a colleague of mine years ago had told me to write a book, but of course, I neglected it. I allowed life and the pressures of life to sort of take me and just take my time and everything. But it wasn't until 2020 that I realized, you know what, I should really sit down and put paper to pen, pen to paper, and write the book, Self-Care Advocate.
Okay, so this is a beautiful thing that you did. And it's funny, it's interesting that you're talking about chronic disease.
Yeah.
And you mentioned in a conversation, I don't know if it was just the conversation we just had or just now, but about diabetes.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, and I don't think people realize that it could be, or is it preventable?
Yes, it is. So when it comes to diabetes, you always want to look at the trend. And when we look at the trends, we see something very interesting. With regards to diabetes, in 1960, 1% of the adult population in these United States was considered to be diabetic, type 2 diabetic primarily.
Yeah.
By 1980, that number had doubled to 2% of the adult population. By 2020, you're looking at 11.4% of the population. So that is a significant rise. That is a meteoric rise in percentage of adults. Now, what's interesting to know, more than just the number of people becoming type 2 diabetic, is the number of people that have become pre-diabetic. So they are at significant risk of becoming diabetic if they continue to live their lives the way they've been living. So if they continue to eat the way they've been eating, social activities the way they've been doing, they will surely develop diabetes. So when you look at diabetes and you look at the trends of diabetes, we see that it has risen significantly and it continues to rise. And we have 38% of the adult population today that are considered pre-diabetic. So if nothing changes by 2040, by 2050 actually, that 38% coupled with the existing 11%, you're looking at almost 50% of adults. So something must be done to stop this chronic disease epidemic. And that's what we're all about. And that's what I try to explain in my book.
Now, in your book, you make it easy. I don't like to use that word because it's not always easy, but you make it simple to understand. Do you think that part of the rise in prediabetes and diabetes has to do with the rise in processed food? It seems like there's a lot of obesity that you see walking around in the street. It's in Americans in particular. We tend to be obese.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if it's behavior, or is it environment, or is it what we're offered to eat?
So that's a great point, Toni. It's actually all of them, all of the above. So a lot of the foods that we eat now are not necessarily the way they were just several decades ago. We're eating a lot more processed foods. Life has gotten significantly busier, right? If you're, for example, if you live in a two-parent household, both parents are working, well, you're coming home tired. So it's a lot easier, or it's more convenient to simply pick up something along the way, because you've got to come home, you've got to unwind, you've got to cook. That takes several hours and clean. So life has gotten significantly more convenient, and you have a rise in fast food. And then you also have to look at farming techniques. You know, what are some of the things, compounds that are being sprayed on the foods, right? And so when you consider the fact that we're eating a lot of additives, we're eating a lot of things, pesticides that are being absorbed by the plants, absorbed by the foods. All of these things contribute to the development of chronic diseases, not just diabetes. Diabetes is one of the things, but all of these things, these malfunctions of your body's systems and organs, they're caused as a result of not only what we eat, some of the things that we expose ourselves to, so the environment, right? You can live in a very polluted area. You can drink water that's been polluted, right? Flint, Michigan. And of course, the lifestyle. We're living a very sedentary lifestyle, which means it's a lifestyle where we're not very physically active. I mean, you can think about this, right? To go to work, you get in your car and you drive and you go, right? And then when you're at work, you're sitting down for 8 to 10 hours. And then you come home, maybe you want to relax and you sit on your couch, right? So studies have shown that if you're sitting down for 8 to 10 hours a day, you know, that increases your risk factors for about 30 different chronic conditions, right? So we have to get back to the point where we look at some of the things we're doing in our lives as whether they're constructive to our health and wellness or not. And I can tell you that we are not as physically active as we need to be. We are not eating foods that are as clean as they can possibly be. And of course, just the modern conveniences, they're very good because they save you a lot of time. But unfortunately, sometimes there is a cost associated with those conveniences. So I would say all three of those reasons contribute to the development of not only diabetes, but most of these chronic conditions. And we're all subject to these things if you're living in America.
I've heard it said recently, more than one occasion, by several individuals and entities, that sitting is the new smoking.
Yes.
Explain that.
When you're sitting down, now, of course, sitting down, you just have to. We're not saying sitting itself is the new smoking. What's actually being said is we're sitting down for long periods of time, coupled with the fact that we are not performing exertion, which means we're not performing physical activities. I think you could counteract a lot of the sitting that we do if you would just exercise for 30 minutes a day, right? You want to sweat. You don't want your blood to almost like remain static. You want your heart to pump, right? Because when the heart pumps or beats, when you're breathing heavy, you're exchanging the CO2 for more oxygen, right? When your heart is pumping, blood is moving, blood is flowing, more blood can actually get to areas of your body, especially organs such as your kidneys, your fingertips, etc. And that blood actually delivers nutrients to your cells and actually picks up their waste, which you're able to breathe out. And you're able to sweat toxins out of your body through your skin. So it's not so much that sitting is so bad. It's more so that we're doing a lot of sitting, we're not doing a lot of moving, right? So if you have to sit at work, you really can't help that. If you have to sit down at school, you can't help that. But what you can control is whether you're going to take 30 minutes out of your day to run on a treadmill or go for a walk or go for a light jog. Those things are within your control, and that's what we try to focus on, especially when we talk about performing exertion, which is one of the steps. It's not always about sitting, because sometimes you just can't control that factor. But the factor you can control is how much moving you do. And yes, the reason it's likened sitting for long periods of time without physical exercise, the reason that's likened to smoking is precisely because it has been shown to contribute to almost 30 different chronic conditions.
Yeah.
And that's the issue at hand.
Yeah. So I can see why they'd make that analogy. Speaking of movement, I've noticed on my fitness app on my phone, there's a part of the app that'll tell you how much energy you're burning actively. That's because you're just walking, and how much energy you're burning, I'll say, passively. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, what I've noticed is that you could walk maybe 2 miles slowly, and you'll burn like a certain amount of calories, maybe 200, maybe 100, maybe 300. But then what happens is your active energy goes way up. Yeah. You're burning like 1,000 because you walked that little bit of time. So when you are sitting, your body is metabolizing passively. Mm-hmm. And I think if people understood that and they knew how easy it was to do that, they'd be, well, let me get out and take a walk and burn 200 calories quick, so I can burn 1,500 when I'm sitting still.
Here's the thing I wish people would understand. We're not saying that you have to go out and run a marathon. We're not saying you have to go out and jog. We're not saying you have to go out and sprint. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that physical activity, it builds up, it accumulates. And so what is important to understand, even if you're someone who maybe you haven't gone running in years, start walking, right? Start walking, especially when the weather's so nice. Go out for a walk. Walk around your block, walk around your neighborhood, walk a mile. You have these smartphones and smart watches now that keep track of your heart rate, your steps and everything, which is really good. It helps motivate people. All you have to do is start. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, because a couple months in, you'll be jogging. And then maybe you'll be running, right? Because your body gets acclimated to whatever activity you're now doing. It's tough at first, but it actually becomes easier over time. That's one thing we have to keep in mind.
Now, what about diet? I've noticed, I want to say this delicately, I've noticed a trend for morbid obesity in teenagers and children as well. And I also noticed the trend of certain people, they drink soda. Yeah. And they don't realize just to take that, I mean, why is that?
So that's a great question.
It's like almost like an addiction.
Yes. So I want to start with your last point about the impact of soda, and then I want to get into the wider realm of diet and nutrition. So soda is has one of the most addicting substances in it, and that's sugar, right? I remember there was an image that used to go around a couple years ago that showed a picture of a person's brain, that the way it lit up when it was exposed to sugar, right? Maybe through a sugary beverage or to something sweet like a donut. And then it compared it to someone's brain, the way it lit up when it was exposed to crack, right? Crack cocaine. And so what was interesting about that picture was your brain lights up a lot more when it's exposed to sugar. And what that tells us is that sugar is possibly more addicting than crack cocaine, right? And now it's not to say that it's as destructive. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying, as far as addiction, as far as your brain sending you signals to get more sugar, constantly consume those things that are addicting, that are packed full of sugar. You know, it's an addiction. And I think that's one of the things we have to keep in mind. And as good as it tastes, well, the brain is also sending you signals, hey, we want more, we want more. Not that you need more, but there is something addicting about the amount of sugar in there. Now, I want to say this. If you ever hold a can of cola or a can of soda, I don't want to single out a particular brand, just look at how much sugar, how many grams of sugar in it. You want to know what's interesting, Toni? According to the American Heart Association, the average adult male should eat no more than 38 grams of sugar a day, okay? The average adult female should eat no more than 25 grams of sugar a day. And as far as children and teenagers, between 12 to 25 grams of sugar a day. okay? Do you want to know how much the average American adult consumes a day?
How much?
77 grams of sugar a day.
Ooh.
So men are consuming, men are consuming almost twice what they should, and women are consuming 3 times what they should be taking in on a daily basis. Now, sugar in itself is a very healthy thing. We have to understand sugar is a healthy thing, but it's healthy in moderation. What is happening is we are overloading our system, right? We're overloading how much sugar we consume, and the body will put up with it. Usually when you're young, it'll put up with it, but as you get older, the body gets a little bit more tired. It's not able to handle that sugar as well as it did maybe when you were younger, right? And this is where we enter into the realm of type 2 diabetes, because you're consuming all of this sugar. Again, it's stored as energy. Interestingly enough, it's stored as energy, but that energy has to be used. So if you're going to consume all of this sugar, one of the best things you can do is go out and burn it, right? That's where the expression burning calories comes from. So you have all of this sugar you're consuming, you should go for a run. You're not going to die. You have enough energy in there, right? But here's the thing. For a people or a society that does not engage in physical activity as it should, but takes in that amount of sugar, what do you have to look forward to? Well, you have type 2 diabetes to look forward to. Not only that, that can contribute to high blood pressure, okay? Not only that, it contributes to all sorts of things, notably something called inflammation, which is actually what we talk about as the first step, right, of our self-care 7 protocol, which is reduce inflammation, because inflammation contributes to 20 different chronic diseases. It is crucial, and it is perhaps one of the most important things to address when talking about preventing chronic diseases. You have to address inflammation. And one common source of inflammation that many of us are subject to or exposed to on a frequent and daily basis is the excess intake of sugars. And so that can come through the foods we eat. I mean, if you ever look at breakfast cereals, right, the amount of sugar in there, that can come through the sodas and the beverages that we drink. Not only sodas, but if you ever go to one of these coffee stores and the whipped cream and all of this stuff, it's a lot of sugar. And that's just for one drink. What about what you're going to drink when you get home? What about what you're going to drink tonight? There's so much sugar that we're exposed to. And it's just constantly creating inflammation in our systems. And yeah, maybe as a kid, you're able to withstand it a little bit, but as you get older, you're not able to withstand it as much. And this is where diseases, chronic diseases, begin to manifest. Now, it can be diabetes, it can be heart disease, it can be any sort of things, but inflammation is at the root cause of all of this thing.
It's true. Type 2 diabetes also, it doesn't necessarily happen to people that are obese, because I had a grandmother that was tiny, tiny little lady. She was very physical, active. She had type 2 diabetes because she ate a lot of sugar. You know that she was one of the grandmas that always had a candy dish there that had the mints and the peppermint patties and all the little goodies, and how they like to give it to you. But it's a concern to me when I see kids that can hardly walk down the street without huffing and puffing. It concerns me. And it's not even unmocking, but it worries me for them.
Yeah. And I want to get into a little bit about nutrition. That was the second part of your previous point. With regards to nutrition, we want to touch upon the fact that, again, when you look at the way society has evolved or society has become, it's often said we live in a society of conveniences, or in a time of conveniences, where ordering food is as easy as dialing a number and they'll deliver. And though that has its conveniences and many a benefit, we also have to consider the fact of how is it cooked? What kind of cooking oil did they use, right? What are they reusing the oil? You and I have no idea of what's going on in the background, right? In the back of the kitchen. And what are we eating? What type of foods are we eating? Are we paying attention? So society has changed in the way that it was. You often think about a time when maybe the wife or the mother would go shopping and she would take her time and look at the fruits and look at this and say, this isn't good, this is good. Unfortunately, because of how expensive life has become and because of how fast-paced life has become, many people don't have that luxury. Many people don't have the time. And so it becomes convenient to simply order out, get food delivered, and feed the kids. And you're looking at all the additives that these kids are eating. You're looking at the seed oils that they're eating. You're looking at the sugar that they're consuming. You're looking at all of these, the fact that they're not exercising, they're not sweating, maybe they're not getting enough fiber so that they can go and use the bathroom and cleanse themselves. You're looking at all these factors. Well, what do you suppose will happen to these children? Well, they're going to get bigger and not taller, but they're going to grow horizontally. And unfortunately, that's where we are in society today.
So I was going to talk about some of the steps, but I wanted to ask you about digestion in the brain. What's the connection? I got to ask that question. Okay, 'cause that's been like a thing. There's a TV doctor. I don't call him a TV. He's not a TV doctor. He's a doctor. He was a cardiologist that changed his life. I'm not even going to say his name, but he made a video that people have seen. Many people have seen that talked about the connection between the gut health and brain health.
Yes.
Now, I mean, I think that your 7 steps to prevent chronic disease address that very well.
Step 4.
Step 4, yeah.
Yeah, so let me just say this. It's often said that the gut is the second brain, right? Your gut is home to between 40 to 100 trillion different microorganisms. Now, that's very interesting because we have what's called a mutualistic relationship. I want you to think about a shark. If you've ever seen a shark underwater, the shark usually has these small fish that swim next to it. They're minnows, right? The shark doesn't eat them, and they're not afraid of the shark. One of the things that they do is when the shark latches onto a seal or something like that, and it starts shredding the skin and eating the blubber and eating the seal or whatever animal it's eating, little bits and pieces fall out. And these little minnows, they swim and they eat it up, right? And so they have a beneficial or mutualistic relationship with the shark. You can think of certain birds can go inside the mouth of a crocodile or an alligator and pick the meat that's stuck in between their teeth. So they're the dentist of these alligators. And so the alligator doesn't eat the bird, even though it could, but it doesn't eat the bird because the bird does it a favor. It's cleaning its teeth, removing meat that's stuck in between its jaws. And so what we have to think of our gut bacteria in that sense. We're often thinking bacteria, germs, evil. No, they're actually very good. For example, they help break down foods, right? As food goes through your gut and it has to be broken down, nutrients have to be absorbed from the food, the fluids have to be taken from them. And so if you have a healthy gut, that process is smooth, right? So you can eat something today and by night you'll poo it out, right? But if you have dysbiosis or an unhealthy gut, what happens? That food sits there. It's not being digested. It's not being extracted properly. It's just sitting there. So the time to emptying is drastically longer, and that can lead to constipation. That can lead to a whole host of other issues, such as irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel, any number of things, gut disorders. So we have to understand the gut microbiome, as it's called, is crucial to our health. Now, where it ties into our brain is really because the gut is actually very useful. Not only does it make vitamins, but it also contributes to the making of certain hormones. It actually sends signals. There are nerves that are connected from your gut over to your brain. So they're actually able to send signals to influence your brain into desiring certain things or maybe telling the brain that, hey, you're full, right? So the gut, a healthy gut is crucial for a healthy brain. It's absolutely crucial. That's why we call it the second brain.
That's interesting to me. I'll tell you after the show why that's interesting to me. I think that people don't realize that there's so much going on in here.
Yes.
There's a lot going on in here.
It's a whole world.
It's a
whole world.
I think also that it's very important that people take care of themselves, getting colonoscopies at a certain age. But I'm wondering if it's being taught in school so children can advocate for themselves, for their own health. Because I have a feeling a lot of kids don't know this, and they're drinking soda. I can't believe how much soda they're drinking.
So to your point, Toni, I don't know that it's being taught in schools. I know that when I went to high school and elementary, we didn't really learn that. Even when I went to college, again, you learn certain things, but fundamentally, we're not nutritionists. And so that's where the challenge comes. A lot of what I had to learn in order to write this book came from outside of school, came from a lot of the books that I read. I simply had the good fortune to put this process together in a way that could be applied gradually, so it's not overwhelming to anyone, right? So these are gradual lifestyle changes, from reducing inflammation to practicing elimination to increasing hydration to what we just talked about, promoting digestion, improving nutrition, performing physical exertion, and of course allowing for restoration. All of that is applied in a gradual way so that it does not overwhelm people. And one of the things I hope to do is with this message of Self-Care Advocate is present this information to schools and government agencies and organizations as far as a program that can be applied to masses of people. And I think we've already done that with a couple of churches, and we've had phenomenal results, fantastic results of people losing weight, people, their blood pressure, their blood sugar being more balanced, people being more mindful, they're adopting holistic habits. And that's the message or the gospel of Self-Care Advocate that I want to share with people. And so not only do we have the book, but we also have a course, which is more structured to guide you into adopting these holistic habits. And so, yeah, as far as schools are concerned, I will be reaching out to certain schools and seeing how we can implement this protocol in their lessons or in some sort of activity in order to get kids a little bit more invested in their own health.
That sounds so excellent. So we're out of time pretty much, but I want you to tell the audience how they can get in touch with you if they want to consult or speak to you.
Sure. So thank you. If you're watching this, thank you so much. So if you want to get in touch with me, my website is very simple. It's 5 letters, drced.com. That's drced.com. There you have access to all of me, including my social media platforms and channels. I have a webinar on my website that's really cool. I encourage you to check it. It's about 20-25 minutes. That goes into much greater detail of what we've just talked about, these 7 steps to prevent chronic diseases. So you can access it directly from my website or drced.com/webinar. And if you want a free copy of my book, albeit a PDF copy, you can go on drced.com/free book. And of course, we have a YouTube channel, we have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have all of this stuff. But if you just go on drced.com, you can access to all of that. And of course, we also have an online coaching program. We also have a course that is available, and you can get access to all of that right from my website, drced.com.
Sounds good. Well, you heard it here. Go to drced.com and you get the whole enchilada. All of the links that Dr. Cedrick has mentioned will be there. And I really love this book, and I wish more people would read it and change their lifestyle, because I do love the human race, all of us, and we need to stay healthy. And so until next time, goodbye, bye-bye.